If there's one good thing that's come from COVID-19 pandemic, it's this. The lockdowns have given everyone the chance to reevaluate where they want to live and work. And many Aussies are opting out of the city lifestyle. Regional and coastal areas of Australia are seeing a major influx of people looking for a sea change or tree change. And who can blame them? There's a lot to be said for going out for a walk or a surf before going to work. But if you're thinking of making the move to somewhere coastal or regional, there's one big problem that no one's talking about: climate change. Now, I know that sometimes it can seem like climate change is a mythical or distant threat being used by super militant activists to make life miserable. Unfortunately, climate change is a real and imminent threat. This isn't going to be a problem for your children or your grandchildren. The effects of climate change could actually make your property uninsurable. Even worse, in some areas, banks and lenders could even refuse a mortgage on properties that are deemed high risk. So before you go taking the leap into your sea change or tree change, you need to make sure you understand the potential impact that climate change could have on your property. In today's video, we're going to cover exactly that. First, we're going to take a look at the potential risks of buying a property in a regional or coastal area that may be affected and how climate change could affect you. Next, we're going to look at the potential impact of buying a home in a high-risk property area. And finally, we'll show you what you can do to avoid getting stuck in an uninsurable property that could end up underwater or even burn down to a cinder. Before we start this video, if you find it helpful in any way, do me a little favor and hit that like button below or leave a comment for the YouTube algorithm. Just a little gesture like that can make a huge difference to the channel, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Thanks you guys, it really means a lot, so let's dive in. So what are the potential effects of climate change on your property? It all comes down to the frequency of natural disasters such as floods, bushfires, cyclones, and hailstorms. As our climate continues to get warmer, we can expect these disasters to become more frequent and more extreme. It's already happening, as we saw in the historic 2019-20 fire season. The fires were started by lightning and human actions, but ultimately, climate change played a huge impact on making the fires grow and spread. Before the fires started, Australia was already having the hottest and driest year on record. More than 45 million acres were burned and 9,000 buildings were destroyed, 3,500 of which were homes. It was a huge tragedy. And the sad reality is, events like these will become more and more common. In coastal areas, bushfires may be less of an issue, although it depends on where on the coast you're living. But climate change is also increasing the risk of floods and coastal inundation. If sea levels continue to rise, our government is going to need to invest a lot of money in building infrastructure to reduce the impact on coastal areas on an inundation, or otherwise large parts of the Gold Coast and other coastal cities will end up underwater. So what's the potential impact of buying a property in a high-risk area? There are three things that could affect you. Firstly, if you're buying in an extremely high-risk area, there's a chance that the bank won't approve your loan. Carl Mellon, CEO of Climate Valuations, says, "We think it's now a matter of weeks and months before mortgage lenders start to refuse lending applications on these sort of properties. So you might not be able to buy the place that you're after. But if you do, then there's another hurdle: insurance premiums. It's estimated that the insurance industry lost between $1 to $2 billion worth of claims related to the 2020 bushfires. Since then, premiums for disaster cover in high-risk areas have gone up by more than 400% or more. And it's the same for flood-prone areas. Many homeowners on the Gold Coast are actually finding insurance for flood cover too expensive, so they're actually going without. You're not legally obliged to get flood cover or bushfire cover, so you can actually tick the "I don't want flood cover" box. But if you do, you're basically playing Russian roulette. Which brings us to the third and final thing: having to face the physical results of climate change. There's a very real chance of having to live through a bushfire or flood, or even a long-term effect of sea rises. Even if you don't lose your house, you could still face some problems in the long term. If lenders are rejecting loans in flood-prone areas and insurance is unaffordable, then the property will be less valuable. So even if you avoid directly being affected by a disaster event, your home could be much harder to sell or even impossible to sell. So what can you do to mitigate this risk? If you're already a homeowner, you might want to hold off on painting your roof and get a climate assessment for your house. A company like Climate Valuations can assess your house for the following: riverine flooding, sea level rises, soil subsidence, extreme wind, forest fire. This report tells you if your property is at risk now and within the end of your mortgage term or at the end of a normal property lifetime. The good news is, if your house is at risk from climate change, you may be able to get a loan that makes your home more resilient. Some lenders are now open to discussions about lending homeowners money to make their home better able to withstand disasters like flooding. The bank benefits when your house is more resilient, and so do you. The bad news is, making a house more resilient to climate change doesn't mean that your neighborhood or city is resilient. For example, if your house is in an area of high sea levels, but the roads leading to it are low-lying, in the event of a flood, your property would be an inaccessible island. So be sure to elect a local government that takes climate change seriously and works towards making the whole area resilient to extreme weather conditions. If you're thinking of buying a home, you should also do a climate assessment on the property you're thinking of buying. In a hot market, you might be tempted to just buy the property before the property flies off the shelf. But think about the long-term goals here. Are you buying a property that you want to be able to pass on from generation to generation? Then don't buy in a high-risk property area. You will be surprised that some areas are so low-lying that you'll be completely underwater within the next 50 years. Also, remember that the higher risk your property is, the more insurance you'll pay. Insurance is an ongoing cost of home ownership, and if you pay a lot for it, then you might go broke just trying to pay the insurance premium. So, will climate change make your house uninsurable? The answer is it might, depending on where the property is. There's a strong possibility that in the near future, insurance companies will refuse to insure properties in some areas, or the insurance will just become too much. Buying a property is expensive, so you want to make sure you do research on the property and its surrounding areas before you commit to getting a 30-year mortgage on it. So, what's preventing you from qualifying for a home loan? Here at Hunter Galloway, we get home loans approved. So if you're living in Australia and looking for a mortgage broker, we can help. Visit us online at huntergalloway.com.au or call us on 1300 088 065 and we'll see you next time.